Good evening. My name is Dr. Adrian Talley, and I'm the Superintendent of Indian Prairie School District. I would like to welcome you to our sixth Parent University, How to Pay for College. You can never start too early thinking about this. Tonight's presentation will focus on financial aid, scholarships, and resources that are available to parents. Our panel of experts this evening will provide you with information to help you navigate the process and ease the stress of paying for your child's college education. Let me introduce our panelists. They include Ms. Darcy Hutzler. She's Director of Professional School Counselors at Metea Valley High School. Ms. Jessica Torres-Proctor, Director of Professional School Counselors at Neuqua Valley High School. And Mr. Ryan VanKampen, Director of Professional School Counselors at Waubonsie Valley High School. I'm so excited to moderate the discussion this evening and welcome all of you. Before we get started with our discussion, I know our directors have a presentation to share with us that will give us some general information about college financing. So let's take a look at the presentation now, and I'll turn it over to the three of them.
All right, thank you, Dr. Talley. Get this up here for us. So tonight we really do want to talk about how to pay for college, but and as much as I want to stay focused on that topic, I do think I have to address something about general college going before we talk about how to pay for college. I know one of the big myths, especially in our community, is that how to pay for college because college is the only way. I want to encourage all of our families that while we're going to primarily talk about college tonight, please know that we're going to talk about other options for post-secondary education. It's not college or nothing, but we do encourage all of our students to go on to some form of post-secondary education after they graduate Waubonsie, Metea, or Neuqua. But we do want to kind of look at college because we know so many of our students are going on to a 2-year or a 4-year university. Last year, even amidst the pandemic, 69% of Waubonsie Valley graduates went on to a 4-year university. And when you include 2-year university or 2-year colleges and trade schools, vocational programs, that number goes up to 96%. And I know that's very similar across our sister schools too. So our kids are going on for post-secondary education, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean a traditional college. There are lots of opportunities for community college, for vocational trade schools, or even starting in the military before going on. So I just want to make sure all our families on the call tonight know that it's not a one-size-fits-all thing here in District 204, but we just want to see what's best for our students. And tonight we're going to talk about one of the more costly post-secondary options of how to go on to college. Another myth that I hope we can address tonight is anyone who is watching thinking to themselves, I really want to go to college, but college is unaffordable for me because fill in the blank. Please know that there are lots of creative ways that you can pay for college. That might not mean starting at a 4-year university. That might mean taking an alternative route there. It might be looking at creative financing. But there are ways to pay for those dreams that you have. You just need to know where to look for those goals and those funding sources. And hopefully, whether it's here tonight or working with your child's school counselor over the next couple of years, we can help you find ways to reach those goals. So kind of looking at why is it so important, or for those of you who haven't done much research into college lately, you haven't been there yourself lately, or maybe you've never been. Here's kind of a where we're at with the state of college financing. You can see that over the past past 2 decades, so 20 years, there's been a 50% increase in tuition costs. And this is just tuition. This isn't including things like room and board or book fees. And you can actually see that the average in-state school across the country today is costing almost as much as a private school did 20 years ago. So that cost has gone up. But some of that doesn't mean that what you pay out of pocket goes goes up as well, because there are a lot of different scholarships, grants, and loan sources that can really help you take that cost down to get it something that's a little bit more affordable for you. So when we're talking about the cost of college or the cost of post-secondary education, it's not just that tuition that you saw on the previous slide. You have to consider a lot of different things in there. You're looking at the big bulk of that expense is tuition and fees associated with your education, but they're also in a close second, if you're looking to live on campus, is looking at room and board. So what does it cost to rent out a dorm room or something off campus? And what are your food costs going to be? We also need to look at things like your books and supplies that you're paying for in college, whether you are buying all of your textbooks, whether you're looking for digital versions of those, or whether you're going on Amazon and saving some money by buying an older edition of that book that still has all of the same material in it. You also need to consider transportation costs if you're going to have a car on campus, or if you're going out of state and you need to come home for holidays or to see your families. And then also consider some of those personal expenses that you might have. The good thing about this that sometimes families forget about is when you're looking at the cost of these education items, especially looking at room and board, your transportation and your personal expenses, when you're paying for these things at college, you're not necessarily paying for them at home anymore. So these, while they're costs for college, you might actually be able to save some money and redirect that in your budget towards the cost of college. For example, if you're you're sending your student out of state for college, you might be able to save money on auto insurance if you don't need to keep them on your plan anymore. That's some funds that you could redirect. While you're paying a room and board fee, you're not necessarily paying the utilities for your student anymore. You're not paying for that large grocery bill at home anymore. So that might be some areas where you could take some of those funds that you were paying for your senior in high school and redirecting them to their college funds. So just kind of keep that that balancing act in mind, that if you're paying for something at college, you're not necessarily paying for that at home anymore, and you can redirect some of those funds to help balance out. You know, another myth that might be different from when a lot of us adults went to college, we used to think of college as in very binary terms. You had public or private schools, you had in-state or out of state. But when you really look at the scope of the different college options that are out there for you now, you can see there's a lot more different categories that we like to break down at the high school to give kids their options for where they go. And each one has not just a set price, but kind of a range that you could pay. On the low end of what tends to be more affordable is the community college option. For our local community colleges, you could be looking at paying between $4,000 and $5,000 a year, and this would include your tuition and fees. For us here in Indian Prairie, we'd be looking at College of DuPage. And that is such a great option and resource for the students in Indian Prairie. Not only does it have a strong reputation locally, but COD has a great reputation across the country. It's historically been ranked in the top 5 in a lot of different community college rankings. So it's just, that's so awesome that we have such a strong community college starting program right in our own backyard. And just to give you an idea of how desirable it is, we often see that a lot of our local public and private universities are actually now partnering with COD to recruit students to transfer to them in the future, or they might even have degree completion programs in place, such as a 2-in-2 or a 3-in-1 program, where a student starts at COD, pays COD tuition for all 4 years, but actually then finishes with a degree from Benedictine or National Louis. We actually see that even University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign partners with College of DuPage for their Pathways to Engineering program. And we see that the students who start out at COD often finish quicker than our students who go direct admit for U of I engineering program. So never count out the power and the value of starting at a commuter or a community college. Then when you're looking at other options, we have what we call in-state commuter colleges. This a great example would be UIC, University of Illinois at Chicago. Here, because it's such a local option, this is something where a student can drive there on a daily basis, and they can save by only paying tuition and not needing to pay the room and board. For these in-state commuter colleges, you'd be looking at about $11,000 to $15,000 a year, and you can even save on your transportation costs by creatively scheduling your classes to only be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or maybe only Tuesday, Thursday. So that you're not having to drive into the city every day or take public transportation in there. So that's another option to save some money. The next kind of tier in terms of financial costs are in-state public universities. And these can have a wide range depending on the tier of school you're going to, kind of from $21,000 a year to $35,000 a year for tuition, fees, room and board. Kind of on the lower end of the cost there, you could attend one of the directional state schools like Northern Illinois, Southern Illinois, Eastern, Western. And kind of at the high end of that is our state flagship school of University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Next, you can look at kind of those out-of-state public universities and colleges. These schools, once again, depending on the selectivity of the school, can range in price from $23,000 a year to $50,000 a year plus. Once again, including your tuition, your fees, your room and board. On the low end of that, you'd once again be looking at some of the directional schools like Western Michigan. And on the higher end of that, you'd be looking at schools like University of Iowa or University of Wisconsin at Madison. And then kind of on paper, the highest cost for some of these colleges and universities are your traditional private colleges. Here you can expect to pay anything from $32,000 to $75,000 a year plus. And these would be schools such as right in our own backyard, North Central College, or on the high end there, Northwestern. But I'll give you the word there that just because that's the sticker price of the college, these private schools tend to have a lot of creative ways where they can offer you institutional grants or scholarships that really help bring that cost down for you. So just because the private school might have the highest price tag on paper doesn't mean that's necessarily the highest price tag that you'll be paying if you choose to enroll there. So don't cut any of these schools out just based on their sticker price alone. So tonight we want to really kind of go into some different categories of how you can find different sources for funding and kind of who's responsible for those funding. So for the types of funding that you'll hear my colleagues talk about tonight, you'll hear about college savings plans, which would be traditionally known as 529 plans, prepaid tuition plans, things along those lines. You also hear about scholarships, grants, loans, work-study programs. And you'll also hear about who is going to be responsible for each one of these types of funding. If you kind of look in both order of prevalence and preference of what you want your student to be paying for, kind of that top source would be coming from the students and the parents. That's typically where the most money is coming from when you're talking about your student's education. That next tier of where you get a lot of money from is from the university itself through the use of scholarships or institutional grants. Both the federal and state government, when you fill out the FAFSA or the Illinois Alternative application, they can give you a great source of college funding through grants or through loan programs there. Then we have a lot of nonprofits. I know each one of our schools, we recently did our senior scholarships from groups like the Booster Club or the PTA, but you also look at like the Rotary Club, the Exchange Club. There are a lot of great nonprofits in our community in the Aurora-Naperville area that offer scholarships for our students. And I really encourage you, when you see these opportunities, please apply for them because they are always looking for more students. And sometimes we have to tell students that scholarships go unclaimed. And that's not just a lie we tell you to get you to apply for them. There truly are local scholarships that have to go to a Naperville student where they might only have one or two students apply for them. So never write off those nonprofit local scholarships. And then finally, kind of like the lowest tier of what we would recommend for college funding sources are looking at privately funded for-profit sources, such as banks or credit card companies that offer private loans that are different from the federal or state loans that you might qualify for when you fill out the FAFSA.
Now, with funding for college, the term that a lot of people may have heard a lot about as far as college savings plans are 529 plans. And there are some savings plans and that can help with college funding. Though there are both advantages and disadvantages to the 529 plans. For example, there are some tax benefits for the 529 plans, but the money does need to be used for education. So there are some limitations there. As with any financial and investment decisions, of course, we do encourage you to research your options very thoroughly, and if needed, speak to a financial expert, a financial advisor. College Illinois is another term that you may have heard related to college savings plans. This is what's called a prepaid tuition program. And with a prepaid tuition program, you actually buy or purchase through savings a share or a semester of education, for example, at an Illinois public university. And so you could purchase, 1 semester of education, 2 semesters, and so forth. That College Illinois program is currently not accepting any new enrollments, but you may be a family who's already enrolled currently in that program. So those are some of the savings plans that you may have heard the most about. So if you are already using those or already enrolled in those or looking to get more information about that, you can research those online or speak with a financial advisor about those. But those are some of the savings plans that do come up most often when people are talking about college savings. Now, there's also a number of different types of scholarships. People are often most familiar, I think, with athletic scholarships. Sometimes you may have heard friends or family discussing someone that they know who got a full ride at XYZ University. So I think, that those are sometimes the athletic scholarships are ones that are more commonly talked about or commonly discussed amongst friends and family. But in addition to those athletic scholarships, there's actually a number of different types of scholarships. There's merit-based scholarships, and merit-based scholarships can be based on students' GPA, their ACT scores, possibly AP scores. There's also some need-based scholarships. So students can access those through filing the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And we'll talk a little bit more about that form later on in the presentation. There's special interest scholarships, and those can be based on participation in a number of activities. Students can be involved in community service, for example. I've seen many scholarships available to students who do volunteer work. Perhaps they're involved in activities where they're showing leadership, and those would be possibly some special interest scholarships. Also, there's scholarships out there for students who are first generation college going students. So if a student is the first in their family to attend college, there's some scholarship opportunities out there for students. And there are also college specific scholarships. So these are scholarships that are awarded specifically by a college that you've applied to and been accepted to. There's also major specific scholarships. We have some, not only community organizations provide these types of scholarships, but universities also have major specific scholarships. For example, there are some community organizations that have scholarships available for students who are interested in majoring in education, business, nursing, botany, a variety of different majors. So as you can see, there's a very diverse scope of different types of scholarships, and many different opportunities out there for students. And with all of these types of scholarships available, people often wonder how to access them. In my experience, the larger scholarships tend to be awarded directly by the colleges. Many colleges consider students for scholarships simply by using the information that students put on their application for admission. Other schools ask for supplementary or a separate scholarship application. Sometimes students need to apply by a priority deadline to be considered for scholarships. And if there is a different deadline than the admission application, it's very important to check the deadlines, check the website for scholarship information, and make sure that you don't miss these types of opportunities. So if I can leave you with, an important tip, it's make sure that you are checking with the individual college, looking at the website, and if needed, contact their admissions office to see if there are scholarship opportunities that are available simply through the admission application, or if there's any supplementary application that's needed to be considered for scholarship applications, because some of the larger scholarships that students are awarded are through the students' colleges themselves. There's also scholarships that are available through numerous organizations. People have scholarships sometimes available through their places of employment, civic organizations, private donors, and these are scholarships that can be found through School Links, which is our online college and career resource in 204. And students have access to this through their single sign-on. And when we receive information about a local or national scholarship, we post it on School Links for students in the scholarship area. Students can also search for scholarships on search engines such as FastWeb and some other resources that we'll provide later on in the presentation. And then of course, students can often ask either their own employer or parents' employers about scholarship opportunities. So there are a number of different sources for scholarship information, but first and foremost, I encourage students to check with the colleges themselves. That's probably the biggest source. Other scholarship tips are to remember that researching colleges and scholarships takes time and work. It's an investment that can really pay off if you put the time and effort into it. Be sure to watch deadlines, as I mentioned before, check requirements, things like I mentioned with additional application. Some scholarships may require essays, they may require recommendations from teachers, counselors. There are chances for receiving a local scholarship are often greater than receiving a national scholarship, but we encourage you to try for any that you might qualify for. Ryan mentioned that earlier about local scholarships possibly going unclaimed. So be sure to check in School Links and those other sources that I mentioned earlier. I mentioned how larger scholarships are awarded typically by the colleges. Another important tip is that private colleges sometimes have more scholarships available to help bring down the cost a little bit closer to that of a public university. Also, some out-of-state public universities have great scholarships for Illinois students. So sometimes students that we work with will say, I'm not sure I can afford a private college or out-of-state public university. Sometimes that price tag is a little bit higher than what I think I might be able to afford. But if they look into scholarship opportunities at the public universities that are out of state or private colleges, sometimes those can make that price a little bit more comparable to what a student would be paying for an in-state university. So we don't want students to eliminate possibilities before they look at what the funding opportunities might be. And then be sure to apply for financial aid through the FAFSA, and we'll look more at that later on in the presentation. You never know what type of financial aid you might qualify for, such as grants and other opportunities. And then the last tip is to beware of scholarship scams, and we have a link in the presentation to help you avoid some of those things. Things like never pay for a scholarship application. Scholarship applications should be free, so avoid things like that. I wanted to give people just a quick example of some some scholarship opportunities. For example, I mentioned some, I know people like to have some specific examples. We have the Midwest Student Exchange Program. This is a multi-state tuition reciprocity program. For example, like Kansas State University and some of the University of Wisconsin system campuses are part of that. And what that does is it is an agreement among several universities in several states that students will be charged no more than 150% tuition of the in-state tuition. So it brings down tuition for out-of-state students within that sort of consortium of universities. So that's a way to bring down your out-of-state tuition for Illinois students, is to look at those particular universities who are part of that Midwest Student Exchange Program. Other things to look at are some universities that have, great out-of-state tuition and scholarship programs. Some universities in the past that students have done well with, our students have gone to University of Alabama, University of Kentucky, University of Minnesota, Ohio State. So there's been a number of opportunities at, some of the larger out-of-state universities that students maybe initially thought, oh, this school's out of state, I'm not sure that I can afford it. So in mentioning specific places, just want to let people know that, it's worth time and effort to look at places that maybe initially people didn't think that they could afford, but to look at what those scholarship opportunities might be for out-of-state students. And then also wanted to share some information. We do have presentations at each of the high schools in the fall. In September, we have a financial aid expert come in at each of the high schools to present a college financial aid night. And what the financial aid expert does, it's a financial aid officer. That presentation provides families with information about the FAFSA and the process in filing the FAFSA. And so we invite all of you to be on the lookout for that information this fall, and any student of any grade level and their parents are always invited to attend that, because we know it's never too early for this type of very specific information. We have guest presenters come, and we like to share information also about webinars and FAFSA completion nights that are available through the Illinois Student Assistance Commission as well. So there are a lot of resources available to help families and to just raise awareness about the FAFSA and the different forms that are needed to help families access funding for college. So there are 4 main routes to take to access financial aid. The first one is the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And I would say that's the main form. And that is going to give you access to need-based financial aid, scholarships, grants, loans, and so forth. The alternative application for Illinois financial aid is for students who are undocumented students, and also for students who are transgender. And this is an opportunity for students to have financial aid opportunities through that application. The CSS profile is also a supplemental form that is required by some universities, but not all. So do check with specific universities to see if that financial aid form is required. And then some colleges might have college specific forms. So that's where you would like that. That's where we recommend that you should look into the financial aid forms that are necessary for each college.
Hello, everyone. So just to kind of add a little bit to what Darcy was indicating as far as the FAFSA application. So FAFSA is a free application for financial aid, and it is a form that that students fill out their senior year prior to going on to college. And through that form, basically it is some form that needs to be filled out every year, with updated information in regards to the family's financial status. When completing the form, basically what the information that will have to be provided is information that comes straight from your tax information that you filed the year prior to filing for that financial aid. So it's very very itemized. It clearly indicates exactly what numbers they're looking for, what information they're looking from your tax return. So it is a little bit of a long process in application. However, I think in the long run, there's some benefits to that. As far as filling out the financial aid form, there are some benefits, like I mentioned, and one of them is the access to student loans. So based on the information that you provide in regards to your finances, there's a calculation that is made. And so it calculates what exactly is your need and how much you can contribute as a family. And based on that information, as that calculation, then you have the opportunity to access certain loans and grants. So through this financial aid, and I think going back to what Ryan mentioned before, even if you think that maybe you wouldn't qualify for financial aid, it's always a good idea to apply, because there are these other pieces that would be beneficial that you may not be aware of. So we always encourage students to, even if they don't think they'll get anything, it's better to apply and really find out what they can be awarded. So through the financial aid form, there are some government student loans that students can qualify for. And so one is a federal direct subsidized loan. And while these are similar, they're different in the sense that, for example, the direct subsidized loan is more for a student. It is one that while the student is attending school, the government pays the tax on that loan. And so how is that different from the unsubsidized loan? Well, that would be one that is not necessarily need-based, and the student would be responsible for paying the tax on that loan during the time that they're attending school. So those are just a little bit of I guess, an example of some of the differences. There's much more, but those are some of the things that stand out. And certainly when you received your award letter, this is the information that will be provided on there as far as which one the student qualifies for. And then you're able to make the decision based on that information. There's also federal direct plus loan, and this is more for the parent. It is under the parent's name. And, as it is with any other loan, there might, the interest rate might vary, and it's just a little different from what they would offer a student who has a loan under their name and may not have necessarily credit. The loan for the parents would require a credit check as well. So those are, three of the loans that you would get information on when you received your award letter. And then also you have the options, obviously, to go private when it comes to loans for your students' education. These loans would be more so ones that you would potentially get through like a bank that would have an interest that would vary, and would just have other guidelines to them in regards to repayment and how typically how a loan that you would get for whether it be a car or a home, something similar of that nature. All right, so grants is another option, or actually another thing that students can access through financial aid and filing that form. And so when it comes to grants, there's two that are pretty significant, and one of them is a Pell Grant, and the other one is a MAP grant. The Pell Grant is federally funded, and the funds can be used to offset, your tuition. And typically, the maximum that's awarded is about $6,000, and that would be, every year. So every year when you file for financial aid, you will, be informed if you qualify for the Pell Grant. Different from the Pell Grant is the MAP grant, and this one is really more so based on the formula that is used by ISAC, which is the Illinois Student Commission, and they look at your financial need in the EFC, what was calculated through financial aid, to really decide if you would qualify for that MAP grant. So there's a secret formula, I guess, that they, use to decide whether a student would qualify for the MAP grant or not. And then there's also grants that are more specific to each school, based also on your information as far as a FAFSA and any other, documents that, like Darcy mentioned, the CSS, any of that information that they look at when deciding to issue any grants at the institutional level. Through the FAFSA form, students also have the option of selecting that they're interested in work study. And so how the work study happens is that it is a federal work study program. And the student will basically is indicating that they're interested in working while in college and, earning some money. That money can be one that is paid directly to the student, or it can be deducted from the student's bill as they go through their college career. There are some requirements as far as kind of like I've listed here that regarding the work hours, it would be 10 to 20 hours a week that student would work. And, one of the things that is nice is that this is not money that is counted into the income when filing the next year's FAFSA. So there's definitely an option. When filing the FAFSA form, there are boxes that a student would check that would indicate that the student is interested in work study, that is interested in receiving information about all the different loans. And so that would be important that the student does indicate that when filing their FAFSA, so that they do, get that information in their award letter as well. So that's just a little bit of a summary of the FAFSA. Like we said, we're strongly encouraging students to file. This year is the first year where it is a requirement for graduation. So we are seeing, a lot of students who are filing already. So with that said, we have a few bits of advice when it comes to making decisions as to, what is exactly financially fit for your family.
So when we talk about the financial fit, just like you want to have a school that's the good personal fit for you and a good academic fit, those are kind of the two areas of the fit, pyramid that families like talking about. They like talking about how their student has achieved academically. They like talking about how they feel on campus and is it a good personal fit for them. But that one big component that families often miss is this school a good financial fit for us? And one of the ways that you find that out is to start having, some realistic, but possibly some difficult conversations with your student about what your family can afford and what do your family's finances look like. I know as parents that might be uncomfortable for us to share with our students a little bit more about what goes on in our checking account and our pocketbooks. But you really need to be realistic with your student about what you can afford as a family versus what the student themselves would be responsible for. That might help them guide them towards the colleges that they can find as a good fit for them that they can get excited about. Some of the hardest conversations that I've had with students in my office have been when they've had their heart set on a specific school. They've worked really hard. They have the academics to get in there. They love it on campus. And then come May of senior year, they find out that their family just can't afford it. If the student is kind of aware of what your realistic finances are going into the college search process, it helps them to set those realistic goals and say, what can I do to maximize what is available to me?
Yes, and another thing is this is a very individual process. What may be the most affordable option for one student is not for another. I think in our experiences, we always hear students who, make choices based on the choices that others are doing, friends going to specific schools. And, I think it's important to remind students that it's what's best for them in terms of fit and affordability, and not what, other students are doing or the school that is everybody's, goal to attend. So really, I think it's having, as Ryan said, having those conversations that it's really what is best in encompassing everything, finances and, location and a few other items that we're going to mention here when making a decision and selecting what school to attend.
Another important aspect of the financial fit is to really look at a variety of possibilities. There are many paths to the same destination. If a student's goal is a particular major, a particular career, there are various ways to get there. For example, a student could begin at a community college. They could take their first year of classes there and transfer. They could earn their associate's degree and move on to their last 2 years after that. A student could go to a 4-year college and commute. Ryan gave that example at the beginning of the presentation. They could look at a 4-year out-of-state school that offers a great scholarship for Illinois students. So there's a variety of options out there for everybody. And beginning early, doing your research, looking at a variety of options, and really keeping an open mind through the whole process will really help students find something that's a good financial fit for them, as well as a great academic fit.
We also want families to make sure that when they are looking at the best school, realize that name brand school might not actually be the best school for your student. I think all 3 of our high schools offer a great presentation in the fall about what makes a great college. And you really need to look at those individual aspects. When you look at the kind of the name brand flagship schools, these are often the schools that have the highest price tag because of some of those reputations. But you might find out that just because a school has a strong brand awareness, you can get a really great personalized experience at a college that maybe doesn't cost as much there. So you want to keep in mind things like the size, the location, the cost, admissions requirements. And really take the time not just to look at the brand awareness, but what's going to be the best fit for your student based on a whole host of factors, including your return on investment for that tuition that you're paying. And then, so at the very end, we will have some resources that we'll share with you. But I know, Dr. Talley, that you have a lot of questions that the community has submitted and probably some questions of your own. So we're going to end our presentation now and kind of open it up for our discussion.
Wonderful. There was just a wealth of information in what you presented, and I appreciate everything that you said. And when you talk about best fit, I remember the valedictorian of a high school when I was shaking her hand and said, "What college are you going to?" She said, "I'm going to community college." And she said, and I asked her why. And she said, "I'm trying to save as much money for graduate school later on." And so that was the best fit for her, to do community college first, then transfer to a 4-year school, and then save as much money and then go on to pay more for graduate school. So it is individualized for our students, and having those conversations with families are so important. So there are a plethora of questions that are asked, so I'll get started. Do you need to reapply for financial aid each year during college?
Yes. Yeah, we need to, schools want an updated information in terms of finances. So yes, they would have to apply every year.
And I also encourage students to apply every year, even if they don't think they might qualify, because your situation might change from year to year. So if you didn't apply for financial aid your freshman year, and then you have someone who experiences maybe a job loss going into your sophomore year, but it could be that even with that job loss, you might not qualify for financial aid based on the FAFSA alone. But if you have those two FAFSAs year by year, and one year you see maybe a $200,000 family income, and the next year you only see $100,000, while FAFSA and the federal government might say, hey, that's still enough not to qualify, the fact that you have two FAFSAs year to year that show that discrepancy or that decline in funds, colleges might have more leniency and more leeway with where they can offer school-specific scholarships. But they can't do that unless they see a trend in your family's finances.
Thank you. I think you've answered this question because you've made it a graduation requirement. If a student feels as though they won't qualify for financial aid, should they apply anyway?
Yes, definitely. Like we mentioned before, you just never know. And I know, one of the things that families can use is that net calculator, which, is available on different websites to kind of get a gauge as to what kind of monies they've received. But I always feel, you just never know. And while you might not get financial aid, again, the being able to access those grants and loans, that work study program, there's too many benefits to kind of overlook, by not filling out that FAFSA.
One parent asked what they should do if they don't have any savings for their child's college education. Will it make any difference if they start to save for college now, if their child is a junior or senior? Or what about if their child is in elementary or middle school?
Yeah. I think when Darcy started talking about the 529 savings plans, those are kind of the traditional route that families look at for college savings. And this is one of those situations where it's never too late to start saving for college, but obviously the earlier you start, the better off you are in terms of getting interest and tax deferred on the growth that you see in those 529 plans. So in that regard, it's really helpful for our elementary school parents who are looking forward. It's great to start that. Now, if you're a junior or a senior, I don't want to tell you not to put in money into those 529 plans because there are still some tax benefits for that. But there might be some shorter term financial moves that you could make with different investments that are out there for you. So that's something where you would want to probably work with someone who is a financial expert, and we have lots of those in the area. We can give you some general advice, but that those financial experts would be able to tell you, a 529 might have a slow growth rate, interest rate, versus you could find probably something that maybe has a higher risk to it, but has a higher interest that you could earn. So it's very dependent. It's never too late to start, but the earlier you start savings, the better for you.
Let me just ask another question about those 529s. Do they impact your financial aid award that a college may give you?
With the FAFSA, you have to report all of your tax information, your investments, savings, and so forth. So any type of assets you have, I think, other than from what I understand from our financial aid experts who've spoken at our high schools in the past, like pension and things like that don't count, but anything that you have, as far as savings, checking cash balances, that kind of thing are reported on the FAFSA.
Thank you. What about military service as an option to pay for college? What are the pros and cons of this option?
There's a variety of options for students with military service who are interested in military service. They do have tuition assistance for active duty service members. There's also the post-September 11th GI Bill for students, but then students can also explore ROTC programs if they're interested in officer training, and that's available at some colleges too. So there is a possibility for students who are interested in military service as well as funding for college.
Yeah, I think the military is a great option for a lot of our students. Not only does it provide you with some of that financial assistance for college, but sometimes even for our students who are unsure of where they want to go right after high school, if they can get some real world experience in the military, they can get some great hands-on training there. And then once they've served their enlistment, they can go ahead and then they can go back to college. So you really see students do it both ways. Some students will sign up for the National Guard or the Reserve, where they're servicing just on the weekends and 1 month a year in the summer. And for those students who go through their enlistment while they're in college, they can then enter the military at an officer rank versus students who enlist right out of high school. They can serve their term, however long they sign on for, and then go back almost tuition free to a lot of schools. A lot of good options there, and it doesn't require a full-time commitment.
Good, good. What financial aid and scholarship options are available for those who may go to community college or trade schools?
Sure. So financial aid is definitely an option. If a student is looking to go to community college, we still, encourage them to apply for financial aid. It is something that students can get even though they're, going to community college. And then, as far as scholarships, again, the scholarships that, Darcy mentioned earlier, would be an option. And even just community colleges do offer quite a few scholarships on their own that are available to students to apply for. So definitely would be, filling out FAFSA and applying for scholarships is something that students should be doing, even though they may be going to community college.
For example, College of DuPage.
I think especially, Dr. Talley, when you...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. College of DuPage has
I think especially COD.
Oh, hold on. Darcy, why don't you start and then we'll have Ryan.
Oh, sure. At College of DuPage, they send information and advertise a scholarship each year. They have varying levels, but they do have a full tuition scholarship, and students can apply for that. The minimum is a 3.5 GPA, and there's an essay required with that as well. And then they also have a trustee scholarship that's about half tuition, and then a dean scholarship that's $1,000 per year. So great opportunities there to have.
Ryan? Yep.
For students who are looking at a trade program, if that's something that they know they want to do, they can actually get a jump start on earning, community college credit and working towards a licenseship right here in high school, their junior and senior year, by attending the Technology Center of DuPage, which is a partnership we have here in District 204. There's over 22 different vocationally based programs where students can get both high school credit, college credit, and work towards that licensure. So that's a great option for students who are looking to save money going into the trades and earning that while they're still in high school.
Good, wonderful. What happens if a student is awarded a scholarship? Does it reduce the financial aid package? If so, does it reduce loans or grants?
I think that depends on the college. They would usually not. If it's through a private organization, let's say a booster scholarship is awarded or PTSA, the check, I think, goes directly to the college. And then that typically doesn't, reduce the amount of the student's financial aid package. But Ryan, Jessica, I don't know what your experience has been.
I think it depends not only on the college, but also on the scholarship that the student is doing. I know some of our local scholarships are paid to the college themselves. Other ones are paid directly to the student. I know recently, like our PTA decided instead of paying directly to the college, now they're giving the students the check for that. So that changes what the college is aware of. But in terms of the overall package, you have to consider that scholarships are part of the financial aid package. So it's not necessarily reducing it, it's just shifting where the scholarship or where the financial aid dollars are coming from. But specifically about your loans and your grants, those are what you qualify based on the FAFSA. So those would not be impacted by a private scholarship. What you might see impacted are the school-based scholarships.
We have about 7 more minutes, and so I'm going to ask 2 more questions, I think, on here. One is, if a student has divorced parents, which parents' information should be used on the FAFSA?
So
This is always a good question, and sometimes parent or students tend to look at maybe which parent makes more money and then go with the other family. Unfortunately, you can't do that. You have to go with the custodial parent that has you for at least that 51% of the time. And often, sometimes you also have to keep in mind that if your parent or guardian has remarried, you have to keep that step parent's information as part of your FAFSA as well. So it really comes down to who the student is living with the majority of the time. And you can often tell that by who is claiming the student on their taxes each year.
Last question before I'll ask you any last tips or bits of advice. Help us understand what options are available in terms of scholarships and financial aid for students who are on a dependent visa, an H-4 visa. The options are not clear for non-citizen, non-green card holders. Also, do the options change if the student is an American citizen and the parent is on a visa?
With the FAFSA asks if students are U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals, or permanent residents. And so I think that students who are not should contact the financial aid office of the college that they're interested in to see if there is institutional money or potentially some state money that is available for them. I think that's probably the best route.
I think that's always when you're looking at immigration status, that can be a barrier for some students. As I kind of mentioned at the very beginning, I hope that students don't look at a perceived barrier and say, I just can't do this. Specifically for those students who are on the H-4 visas, it's tough because they are often considered international students by the colleges, even though they've attended high school, right here in Indian Prairie. But they are often considered those international students, and they wouldn't be eligible for the state or federal grants or even loans there. Oftentimes, the students on visas are eligible for institutional and private scholarships, so they should never rule that out. They are also often it's a little trickier for them to get private loans from a bank because they don't have that social security number and they don't have a credit history, but it is possible to take out private loans if you have someone who is an American citizen who will co-sign that loan for you. So if you have any family who would be willing to do that, that helps our students who are on visas. For our students who maybe they're citizens, but their parents aren't, they can still fill out the FAFSA. And if their parent has a tax ID number, a TIN, they would include that on the FAFSA, or they would still include their parents' financial information, but putting all zeros in where the social security number would go. And then kind of the students who fall into that undocumented status, they sometimes have some reluctancy to come forward. But I would say that Illinois is probably one of the best states in the country for undocumented students to receive that post-secondary financial assistance. Illinois has developed the Illinois Alternative Application for Financial Aid, which is for those students who really can't fill out the FAFSA because they don't have a social security number, but they are still eligible for the same MAP grant that naturalized citizens are. Here in Illinois, tuition, they can still get in-state tuition with undocumented status. And there are a lot of often first-generation programs that can really help out our students. So I would just encourage anyone who's listening right now, regardless of your immigration status, there are opportunities for you. And I would encourage you to find someone you trust at your high school, whether that's one of us on the call tonight or your student's own counselor. Reach out so we can help you. We want to make sure that you're achieving those dreams.
And I also want to just put in a good word for the financial aid officers at the colleges. They have a lot of expertise in this area, and sometimes there's even people in those offices who specialize in working with students who have moved internationally and are very familiar with helping students and connecting them with scholarship and other financial aid opportunities like that.
So, well, are there any last tips or pieces of advice you'd like to share with any parents tonight? I think there's one slide that you wanted to go through of resources.
And we'll pull that one up real quick. Darcy, did you want to go over these resources?
Sure. We wanted to just share tonight all the different people and resources that are here to help you with college funding. And Ryan put it really well when he said, you know, want to be able to help you achieve your dreams. For after high school, your counselors at your high schools can assist you. You know, we kind of have a little disclaimer, you know, that we're not financial advisors, but we can certainly help connect you with different resources in the community in terms of helping you connect with that college admissions representative or that financial aid representative. Those individuals are experts in their fields and have a lot of knowledge to share with you, and they're really interested in helping you get where you want to be with your college experience. And so they're just a wealth of knowledge, and we can help connect you with them and answer any questions that we can help you with. We also, in the state of Illinois, have a wonderful resource in the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and I encourage everybody to check out their website. It's isac.org, and that's listed here on the slide as well. That's a great place to start for just familiarizing yourself with the terminology and the vocabulary in the world of financial aid and scholarships. That's a great resource and a great starting place. So the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and they have a representative that works with each high school, so we can connect you with that person if you have any questions that we're not able to answer. And then the 1-800 number for the FAFSA is also a great resource as well. Sometimes the questions on the FAFSA, you know, questions about, you know, which parent do we put down, you know, if you get to that point later on in your student's high school career, senior year, and, you know, different things, you know, what kind of assets do you put down, and what are those more complicated financial questions to answer on the FAFSA. You can use this 1-800 number to talk with a representative, and they're super helpful on that line. We also have some scholarship websites listed and financial aid resources. So we encourage you to check all of these resources out, and hope that these are helpful to you and a great starting place. It's you know, sometimes we think it's almost like a part-time job looking for scholarships and financial aid, but it really, the more work and investment that you put into the process, the more this will pay off for you. So we wish you all well with this process and hope that this has been a helpful time for you tonight.
So this has been a most informative discussion, and I'd like to thank each of you for sharing your expertise in this area. Thank you to our viewers for attending this evening. We will have information on our homepage that includes the link to this presentation on the district's YouTube channel, contact information for our panelists, and additional resources discussed tonight. I wish all of you well as you plan for your children's future. Have a wonderful evening.